One has to spend so many years in learning to be happy. Every year strips us of at least one vain expectation and teaches us to reckon some solid good in its stead. I think that if you had asked me whether I thought this was on track, this George Eliot quote, saying that we have to spend many years in learning to be happy, I think if you had asked me that when I was a younger person, I probably would have, like most younger people, and said, no, that's bunk. I'm pretty happy now, or at least I have some idea of what it means to be happy. And I think that Eliot is actually correct, that it's the experience, and not just accumulating experience in the sense of, sagaciousness or learning about how things work, but the experience of suffering and having to think about why, in fact, we are unhappy rather than being happy, what it is that we're disappointed by, where we went wrong. I think all of that sort of reflection goes into allowing us to actually find our way to more lasting, more genuine happiness. I think that a lot of times we embrace spurious types of happiness as well and turn out not to be all that happy, sometimes forcing ourselves to try to appear or feel happy as a result. So, this notion that every year strips of us at least one vain expectation and teaches us to reckon some solid good in its stead, what that's talking about is becoming more realistic, not in the sense of just lowering your expectations, but becoming realistic by saying that is a real good. This over here, that was only an apparent good. And I may have, hitched my wagon to that star, but I can unhitch it, and I can now hitch it to this one over here, or just let it sit still. There is a wonderful mythical law of nature that the three things we crave most in life, happiness, freedom, and peace of mind, are always attained by giving them to someone else. This quotation by Peyton Conway March, this is a really fascinating one that gives us a lot to think about. The three things that we crave most in life, happiness, freedom, and peace of mind, which penetrate each other, but are distinct. They're different from each other. Freedom and happiness often don't go hand in hand. Sometimes they're irreconcilable depending on your notions of them. Peace of mind and happiness are not exactly the same thing either. And peace of mind and freedom don't always align with each other. As a matter of fact, sometimes we really only enjoy our freedom when we're placed in situations where we don't have peace of mind, where we couldn't have peace of mind. Be that as it may, we do desire happiness, and what this quote is talking about, and what I really like about it, is that it's saying we don't get to have that on our own. There's a lot of people who imagine happiness to be something that they would have totally on their own, and if everybody else would just go away or everybody else would be subject to them. Genuine happiness comes through some sort of integration with others. It doesn't have to be the whole world, the whole universe, but there do have to be some others with whom one shares things, with whom one can live in a kind of harmonious existence, so that, if we work towards the happiness of others, not necessarily all others, maybe more, those who are grateful for it and appreciative of it than those who are ungrateful. If we work for their happiness, their peace of mind, and their freedom, that's one of the conditions for allowing us to fully experience those as well. If to enjoy even an enjoyable present we must have the assurance of a happy future, we are crying for the moon. If then we cannot live happily without an assumed future, we are certainly not adapted to living in a finite world where, despite the best plans, accidents will happen and where death comes at the end. So with this quote from Alan Watts, there's really no surprise there if you know much about Watts and his own spiritual journey through comparative religion. I do like what he's saying here, that we have to adapt ourselves to living in a finite world. Even if we think that there are openings to something exceeding the world, something transcendent, the world of our experience is a finite one. And if we invest it with infinite demands, infinite wishes, infinite desires, we're bound to be disappointed. That's not to say that other people in the world aren't, you might say, points of infinity, but they have to be sort of opened up, and you can't force them to do that. They have to be allowed to do that, to use a word that Watts, liked quite a bit, and many people of his generation did, organically. So a lot of us are looking for security and imagine that happiness and security are intimately connected, that we can assure ourselves of happiness. And as creatures in a world of finitude, that's not going to be possible to us, especially a world of finitude that we don't fully grasp, we don't fully understand. We're not God, after all. So in order to live happily, we have to, I don't want to just say embrace the moment or something like that, as if we don't have any past, we don't have any future. But we have to be willing to say, I don't need to control everything. I was thinking this morning how on earth it came that I, who am fond of talking and am scarcely out of spirits, should so entirely rest my notions of happiness on quietness and a good deal of solitude. During the last 5 years of my voyage, which from the active manner in which they have been passed may be said to be the commencement of my real life, the whole of my pleasure was derived from what passed in my mind, whilst admiring views by myself. I think that you will humanize me and soon teach me there is greater happiness than in building theories and accumulating facts in silence and solitude. I very much like this quotation by Charles Darwin, who's writing to his wife Emma while he's still in the middle of his journeys. He's contrasting a couple different notions of happiness that are coming through anticipation, coming through experience, and he's being very reflective, and he's showing us that he's very much a man of his times intellectually. We tend to think of Darwin, and the word we associate immediately is evolution and theory, but we forget the fact that this guy was kind of an adventurer in a way, as many of these explorers, scientists, great theoreticians were. He's traveling around the world on a ship, and he's experiencing nature in ways that very often we ourselves don't have access to, because it's a different century that he's inhabiting. We have to do a lot of work to get away from modern technology. He had to bring it with him. And so he's exposed to these wonderful, immense landscapes, seascapes as well, and he takes pleasure in that. Happiness for him, he talks about it at first, happiness occurs for him in solitude. Why does it occur in solitude? Because he is on his own, enjoying the natural landscape, but also enjoying the life of the mind, accumulating facts, as he says, working out and contemplating theories. Now, notice then what he's saying to this woman who he hopes to enjoy wedded bliss with. He says, you're going to humanize me. You're going to reveal to me something more about the human. And I don't think it's just sort of romantic claptrap, sentimentalism. He recognizes that to really be happy in a higher sense, it has to be in relationship, or perhaps even in some sort of community with other beings, other people. And for us human beings, animals and nature, however great it can be, however fascinating, just doesn't cut it. So he says, you're going to teach me there's a greater happiness. And I like that notion. A clear horizon, nothing to worry about on your plate, only things that are creative and not destructive. When all of these negative emotions are removed and you can look forward and the road is clear ahead, and now you're going to create something, I think that's as happy as I'll ever want to be. So I'm finishing up here with a quotation that was brought to my attention by an old friend and colleague years ago, who himself very much likes Hitchcock and his movies and his sentiments in art. And I really like this as well. Hitchcock was sort of a unassuming guy. He put himself into a lot of his movies as that guy who's bumbling around over there, as a bit shot. And what he's saying here is really fascinating. A clear horizon, nothing to worry about on your plate, only things that are creative and not destructive. And then I left a bit of that quote out, but he's talking about negative emotions and how, although people don't realize it, he's quite sensitive and will dwell on somebody, giving him a cutting look or saying a mean thing to him. And so this creative, not destructive, positive, not negative. It's not just, I want to be free, I don't want to be bothered by people. He, like many creative people, wants to be able to concentrate on his art. He wants to be able to concentrate on the processes of creative production, which involves a lot of thinking, involves a lot of pondering, a lot of hoping for the happy moment, a lot of putting in the time so that things can align right and you can grasp something and say, aha, now I've got it. So he says, what I like is a clear road. And I can fully understand that. A day when I get to write or even just to think about things, and I get to put aside all of the other stuff that I have to worry about, all the preoccupations with other people's needs, desires, complaints. There's a liberatory force to that feels extraordinarily good. And so that is his picture of happiness. And that's what I'm going to leave you with. I've looked at these 5 really quite different quotations by people who had interesting things to say about happiness. I'm not saying that you can synthesize all of these or put them together in one unified viewpoint. I don't think that we need to. But I think that as we're moving into this Happiness Happens month, it's a good idea for us to look at what brilliant people have had to say on the nature of happiness and to reflect on it ourselves and really mull it over and say, is there something to this or not? And what else does that make me think about?